Okay, so Fiddler on the Roof ties in perfectly to this Russian Revolution of 1905 that we were talking about with Battleship Potemkin. But the story itself is really just kind of a family drama in this Jewish community. So, yes, as you kind of alluded to, Logan, I was shocked when I pulled this up on Amazon to watch it today. And I'm like, oh man, this is 3 hours long. And yeah. I had seen it before, but it had been a while. So had you seen this movie before?
No, I'd absorbed a lot of the music through just osmosis because it's so popular and so famous.
Right. It's almost, I bet you probably hit the point where you're like, oh, that song's from this movie, and then probably had that same moment 10 minutes later, and then again a half hour after that.
Yeah, that happened that happened 2 or 3 times, I think.
Absolutely. But, I even kind of made notes that's like, oh my gosh, that's always kind of neat that when you use things you've heard of, you're like, oh, that's what it's from.
Oh, right. So, like, if someone says, finish the phrase matchmaker, matchmaker, I say, oh, make me a match. And right. Then, gun to my head, what movie is that from? I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I'm dead. Oh, Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
Okay, so, again, doing this as a bonus episode, largely because this does not depict a specific historical event or involve specific historical characters. So those are the ones I don't really like to do as full-on episodes, and wouldn't have probably enough to talk about if I didn't have Logan here to kind of just shoot the breeze with as we talk about it. So I've never been a huge musical fan, but I really dig this movie, honestly. And I remember liking it the first time I saw it, rewatching it for this with a little more of the historical mindset, enjoyed it again. The music is really good. And honestly, man, the character of Tevye is probably one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. Like, he's just such a cool character. Great. Yeah.
He's so funny. He's so emotive. He is super charismatic. It's impossible not to like him.
He's almost like the big, boisterous, abusive drunk without the abuse.
Exactly, yeah.
He just has he's kind of all bluff and bluster, but he has such a good heart at his core that you just can't help but love the guy, even when he's in the wrong.
Right.
So, I mean, not to jump ahead, but again, the plot didn't really happen. But at the end, when he tells his estranged daughter, or actually didn't speak to her directly because he basically says she's dead to him, but his other daughters and his wife are talking to her, and they're kind of telling her goodbye, and he kind of just says, loud enough for most to hear, and just says, God be with you. And I started bawling.
Oh, man, because he spends that entire scene just ignoring her.
Right.
And you can tell that it is, that's absolutely devastating to his wife and his daughter who just showed up and his other daughters who are all standing there, that they're like, she came back. But we can talk about that at the end.
Yeah. So going back to the movie, and I did think it was interesting too. So I didn't really remember exactly what the title kind of meant. Like, I knew there was a guy who fiddled on the roof, which is not Tevye. It's just kind of like a local guy who plays the fiddle on the roof. But the way Tevye explains it is it's almost kind of just this metaphor of kind of a joy of life and enjoying yourself in a skillful way, but at the same time being delicately balanced and could fall at any time. So it's basically a metaphor. But there is a literal fiddler on the roof in the film. He's just kind of a background character who we see a few times. It's really just to give us the title and kind of have that metaphor. But the main character is Tevye, who is I think they call him a milk farmer. So they don't say dairyman or anything like that necessarily, but yeah, so he's got cows and a farm there, and they're just kind of struggling. Like, they always have enough to eat and everything, so they're not like starving, but they don't have any more than their own sustenance, basically. And they're kind of in this poor village, and he's got 5 daughters. 3 of them are kind of getting to marrying age. So basically the whole plot of the film is the marrying off and pairing off of these daughters in a world where arranged marriage is the norm, and just kind of dealing with that and arranging a marriage with the butcher who's like older than Tevye. And of course then the daughter's got the local tailor that's more her age that she actually wants to marry and would be a love match, and just dealing with all of those things in general in a time where that was not the norm, and just kind of how society's progressing. And they have basically, I guess you would probably call him a communist that moves in and befriends the second daughter, and it's kind of like, hey, you know what? We're at the wedding. I'm going to dance with the girl.
Yeah. It's interesting to see, which this was obviously on purpose, but at the beginning of the movie, the first daughter kind of not accepting the marriage that he arranges for her and then marrying for love, to him, that's like, that's the end of the world. Like, that's as crazy as it can get, right? But she does still marry, a friend of the family. She does still marry someone who is a practicing Jew.
Correct.
And basically, still holds all the same social and cultural beliefs and values that they do. Then the second daughter marries someone who is just going, it's like a little bit further away from, a little bit further outside of Tevye's comfort zone.
Right, he's kind of a rabble-rouser and revolutionary. Yeah.
Right. He's still a Jew, though.
Correct.
So he's still a Jew. So in the end, he's able to reconcile that in his head and say,
win over Tevye, yeah, or get Tevye to reluctantly agree to the match, yeah.
Right, and then the third daughter marries just a straight up Russian kid.
Right, Christian, right, Russian Orthodox kid, yeah.
Right, and that's kind of the last straw for Tevye. He's like, I can't go there. That's too much. Can't accept that. And then at the end of the movie, we find out that ultimately he still loves his daughter, and that his family is the more important thing.
Right.
To him.
Despite him saying that she's dead to us, we don't have that daughter anymore, and he still ignores her when she comes to say goodbye at the end. But he still throws in that line, and it's just God be with you. And almost like he's not even saying it to her, like he's just reminding his other daughters to tell it to her. But the fact that he's not actually denying her existence, and like you said, it's his daughter and he still loves her. And again, I just about lost it. And I'd seen it before, I just kind of forgot that little moment, and it's just so poignant. So what we haven't mentioned, so that's basically the main plot as far as the characters are concerned. But then what's happening on the background, and it does kind of tie into the second daughter's husband, is just kind of the revolutionary stuff. But then also, again, the reason we're talking about this is kind of the treatment of Jews in Russia at the time.
And this is it also connects to the constable character, which I actually thought was like the most interesting part of the movie, was Tevye and the constable, their relationship. Because at the beginning of the movie, it's when his horse gets hurt, so he's pulling his own cart, and the constable just kind of jokes with him, where's your horse? And he's like, oh, my horse is hurt, Your Honor, haha. And then, it's like fun. Then after Tevye gets super drunk, after he arranges his first daughter's marriage, he meets the constable outside the bar, and the constable tells him, hey, just so you know, we're going to get orders to have a pogrom here. It's basically just a fancy word for, well, not a fancy word, but it's basically just a word for like an anti-Semitic riot in Russia.
Yes, basically we're going to get orders to knock heads around.
Right, either actors from the state directly, like the police, or an independent, quote unquote, independent movement that's just condoned or sponsored by the state, just basically comes into a Jewish community and beats people, breaks things, destroys businesses, that kind of stuff. But what I really liked about the movie is that they don't necessarily portray the constable as a mustache twirling, I'm a racist and I don't care villain. He legitimately thinks that he is being a good friend to Tevye just by telling him that it's coming, and basically saying, hey man, orders is orders. And there's a couple things that he says where he's like, he tells Tevye like, oh, I don't remember if he says you're funny or you're smart even for a Jew or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I just thought that was super interesting, that like they made that character to where he probably doesn't think that he's the bad guy. He probably doesn't even necessarily think that he's racist.
Right, but he still takes it for granted that he's better than Tevye, even though he likes Tevye.
Right.
He just takes. He doesn't think he's better out of a spite. He's just like, well, that's just the way it is, and you're a good guy though.
But I kind of got the impression that if you pull that character out of the movie, and you say, hey man, why do you hate Jews so much? And he says, oh, he would probably respond, well, I don't hate Jews. I have Jewish friends.
Right.
I'm not racist against Jews. I mean, yes, I'm doing all of this, state sponsored and state condoned violence against them, but that's just because I'm being told to. That I'm just doing my job, but I'm not a racist.
Right. Even though he also does think he's better than them.
Right. Yeah.
Because Tevye even says like, oh, you should have been a Jew, or like you could almost be a Jew, and like Tevye means it as kind of a compliment, like we're equals. And the guy's like, ha, you're always joking around. That's what I like about you. Like, how ridiculous is it that you would say that? That's funny.
Right, but he thinks that that's endearing, not insulting.
Exactly. But because it's so taken for granted that he's above Tevye, though.
Yeah, but I think that character of the constable, it's a good way to demonstrate how, we go from, at the beginning of the movie and at this time period, people living in peace and harmony, and then you have this white supremacy, white nationalism, anti-Semitism kind of thing start to creep in a little bit. You start to see in the constable and his cronies this kind of a nationalism tied to race, that when it's allowed to be taken to the extremes, like obviously this is 1905, and yeah, they're just roughing up a couple of small neighborhoods, but then it ends up basically throughout the first half of the 20th century just building and building all this anti-Semitic and racist sentiments in Eastern Europe and in Europe as a whole, and it culminates in the Holocaust. But I just thought it's a lot of the times when we think about that kind of stuff, we think, oh yeah, the Holocaust, it's so bad. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are kind of like, well, how, I just don't understand how anyone could ever condone that kind of thing. And, when someone says, yeah, let's just put these, people in camps and gas them to death, how did anyone think that was a good idea? And it didn't start there, right? It starts with like the little, on a small local level, with people like the constable who think they're just following orders and, oh, it's not that bad. And they just make that argument over and over and over again until, Holocaust.
Right. The Holocaust didn't come out of nowhere. It was centuries in the making.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the pogroms. Did they use the word pogroms in the film itself, or were you just looking that up after the fact? Okay.
So basically the guy, I don't remember the word he uses, the constable, he says something like, we're going to have a demonstration, or we're going to have a something.
So he doesn't call it a pogrom in the
No, but Tevye says a pogrom here?
Gotcha. Okay. I actually missed the use of the word in the film. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because what we should mention here is that, so it's almost even kind of ancillary to it. So the pogroms that you're talking about were basically a decades-long thing. They weren't just in 1905. So if anything, they're not really a part of the 1905 revolution, other than it is kind of just part of that heightened tension thing and of ethnic minorities kind of being oppressed and then rising up in other areas. And then, of course, then we see the second daughter's husband getting involved in the actual revolution when he goes to like Kiev and all that kind of stuff. So it is still at the same time period, but the pogroms themselves were happening for decades. And I think they said the worst year was actually 1881, but they were happening for a long, long time. And what we also haven't mentioned yet is basically where this is all taking place. They're in an area called Pale of Settlement, or the Pale of Settlement, which is basically, it sounds like as the Russian Empire kind of took over parts of Eastern Europe where a lot of Jews already were. So basically they expanded the empire, but also wanted to kind of keep the Jews concentrated, which, I mean, I'd say poor choice of words, but that's actually an accurate choice of words. And
exactly.
So they kind of forced existing Jews within Russia to kind of go to this spot, and basically that was like the only place they were kind of allowed to be. And it's basically in mostly what's, I think, now modern Ukraine. So honestly, we're kind of right on top of where battleship Potemkin was, as far as I think Odessa is actually in the Pale of Settlement, and looking at the map there.
Yeah. Yeah, because the big city, quote unquote, big city to this village is Kiev.
Yes,
because that's where that's where that revolutionary kid is from, and then where he goes back to, like towards the middle of the movie, is Kiev.
Right, so they're probably in the northern part of it. But as far as the Pale Settlement itself, it looks like it includes Minsk and stuff like that. But yes, they're just kind of in the poor farming village in this kind of Jewish region of Russia at this time that was kind of dedicated for that purpose. It's actually set aside in the late 1700s by, I don't think it was Catherine the Great, I think it was Catherine II, it said, and then existed through basically the Russian Revolution.
The pogroms, the ones in 1881, and then, basically for the next 20 years, it says here, it cost thousands of Jewish lives, and it forced more than 1 million, it forced a lot more than 1 million Jews to immigrate, but more than 1 million of them ended up in America.
Yes, that's definitely worth mentioning. This is one of the biggest times for Jews coming to the United States.
Right, which they talk about at the end of the movie. The one guy says, oh, I'm going to Chicago, America. And they say, oh, well, we're going to New York, America. We'll be neighbors.
Yes. And then I also thought it was interesting, though, too, then the one daughter, actually the daughter who I think married the Christian boy, said they were going to Poland. And you think this is 1905, and you're just thinking, oh, man, like, them as, they're, probably in their late teens, early 20s at that point. So you just know that they're going to be the people, if they stay in Poland, they're going to get rounded up, 3-4 decades in the future when they're kind of in middle age there. And it's almost kind of probably an intentional foreshadowing by the movie, honestly, because so the movie's from 1971. I didn't see what year the play was actually written.
It was 1964.
Exactly. So they had the hindsight, of course, of what had actually gone down in World War II, and that's definitely kind of prevalent throughout the movie.
Right.
One newspaper quote here. This is from the New York Times in 1903 from another pogrom, and I'm sure I'm saying that word wrong, but just how the general treatment of Jews in Russia at the time. So again, from the New York Times, it says the anti-Jewish riots in Russian city name that I don't need to try to pronounce are worse than the censor will permit to publish. There was a well laid out plan for the general massacre of Jews on the day following the Orthodox Easter. The mob was led by priests, and the general cry, "Kill the Jews," was taken up all over the city. The Jews were taken wholly unaware and were slaughtered like sheep. And again, continuing on here, it talks about the number of people died, and it says the newspaper is actually wrong here, but 40-some people dead, 500 injured, and it continues. The scenes of horror attending this massacre are beyond description. Babies were literally torn to pieces by the frenzied and bloodthirsty mob. The local police made no attempt to check the reign of terror. At sunset, the streets were piled with corpses and wounded. Those who could make their escape fled in terror, and the city is now practically deserted of Jews. So again, that's from the New York Times in 1903 regarding what was going on with the Jews in Russia at the time. Again, it basically, that's darn near genocide, other than the numbers are, I guess, I hate to say the numbers are low, but it wasn't like they were killing thousands necessarily in that one incident. But again, stuff like that was happening for decades, and they just would just kind of randomly knock heads, the Jews there, and just make it miserable for them. And so the other place they went when they were fleeing Russia, other than the United States, was also Israel. And they mentioned that in the movie as well, is that the old lady, the matchmaker, is going to go to Jerusalem.
That's right, yeah.
And of course, then that's part of I guess that'd be part of what the Zionist movement, right? Of just kind of the Jews kind of slowly working their way back to help repopulate the Holy Land before of course, we get to 1947 and the establishment of Israel. So it's all connected. And again, I say it over and over again. And of course, as we get into the 20th century here, it becomes more and more manifest. But the history is not some distant thing. It's all connected, and us right now here, we're still debating a lot of these same issues that have these ties to stuff we're talking about from hundreds of years ago. And it's just kind of fascinating, but it's, more than that, it's important. I think it is important to understand the context of all this stuff. And it's like, for example, do Holocaust deniers deny the massacre of Jews in Russia also? It's just, I don't understand. It's just, it's all part of this one piece, and just to deny it or to neglect to appreciate the impact of it is just ignorant and irresponsible, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to learn about stuff like this, which Holocaust deniers, I think, they'll make their arguments for the 1930s to 1945. But I mean, this stuff's been going on. I'm talking about anti-Semitism specifically here since the Middle Ages.
Yes, and I'm going to attempt to, I didn't do redo the research here, but so I think it was in Outliers that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, okay, basically, again, another kind of thing of the ripple effects. The way I understand it, again, this is kind of my memory from reading this book 10 years ago and other things I've kind of heard since then, but basically, the Jews in Europe basically weren't allowed to own land, so that none of them were farmers, so that they're forced into the cities where they learned trades, like they would become, tailors or butchers, like we saw in the movie here, or, the equivalent of accountants, or just whatever it is, they would learn some skill. So then when everyone's emigrating to the United States, well, the Germans and the Irish came later, but let's say that, the Germans and the English and, the Norwegians, they're all farmers. So they get to the city and they either move out and go find land, or if they're stuck in the city, they're manual laborers because they don't have any skill beyond farming. Whereas the Jews are coming over and it's like, oh, well, I'm already a great baker, so I'm going to open a bakery. So they had more success in the United States, and then were more able to send their children to college. So basically, Gladwell was saying the reason you have a disproportionately high percentage of Jewish doctors and Jewish lawyers is because of that financial success, because of their persecution in Europe leading to them being skilled versus unskilled when they came to the stage. But I just thought was kind of fascinating and something I would never have considered before reading that.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before, but that totally makes sense.
So let's talk about just the movie itself as a production. So I don't know if you looked, but guess how old the guy playing Tevye was when this was filmed?
Oh, man. 55?
36.
No way.
He was 36. So he's only 15
Is that
years...
makeup, or did he actually look like that at the time?
They probably grayed his beard, and I don't know if the beard was real or not. But it's also cool, too, is so the guy just goes by Topol. Like, he it's his last name, but it's kind of like Madonna or Cher.
He's Israeli, right?
Yeah. So Israeli actor, and he just goes by Topol, which I thought was kind of cool. And what was neat, too, is basically he played Tevye on stage and screen over 3,500 times in his career.
Wow.
I mean, that's basically, what is that? Once every 10 days for 10 years kind of thing? Or no, sorry, it'd be once a day for 10 years. If he were to, yeah. So, but it was basically over 40 years. Of course, It helps when he starts in his early to mid 30s, because he had done it on stage before he had done this film production. And he's still alive, but I think he's retired from playing Tevye. But basically, he was playing Tevye from like the 60s into the 2000s. He was still doing performances as Tevye. So that's how you get to 3,500. But I thought that was really cool. And the movie was nominated for, let's see, count up real here, 8 Oscars, including Best Picture. Topol was nominated for Best Actor. It won for cinematography and sound.
And it won for Best Music Scoring for John Williams, because of course it did, because John Williams is the man.
Yep, you beat me to it. So I guess he didn't like, and I'm not sure exactly how that works too, because he obviously didn't like write the music, because it was a Broadway musical before that, and that's not really his thing. But as far as scoring the movie goes and the accompanying music, so I'm not sure exactly what all he wrote then for the movie, but it was enough to get him or did he say he won? Or was nominated?
Yeah, he won.
Yeah, he won the Oscar.
No, he got an Oscar this year. Yep.
Yeah, so that's kind of insane. When his most recent nomination was just last year.
Side note for the film nerd part of the podcast.
Absolutely.
John Williams, man, what a career! I mean,
yeah, it's kind of nuts. I can't even count the nominations here. Like,
it's insane that he won an Oscar for this, and like, I didn't even know that he wrote this, but like, I mean, he's just so ubiquitous. I don't think people necessarily understand, if they're not into this kind of thing, like how much iconic movie music is the work of John Williams. I mean, the Jaws soundtrack, the Star Wars soundtrack, the Indiana Jones soundtrack. Like,
right. Even the Superman music is iconic, and just music you would definitely recognize. E.T. when they're going by the moon, like that's all John Williams.
Jurassic Park,
and all. How does one person think of that many unique score? Especially when a lot of them are simple. A lot of his stuff. He's Harry Potter too. Like a lot of his stuff it's just a few notes, and it kind of gets your mind going, and you know immediately what song it is after 3 notes, and they're all so unique. Gosh. It's like, how do you keep coming up with new stuff when you're in like your 80s now?
If a composer made had just one impact on music that was as big as, say, the Star Wars theme song, like that would make someone's entire career, and this guy's done it like a dozen times. Right.
And of course, and Star Wars itself has so many. You got like Luke's theme, you got the Imperial March is completely different than that, and just it's definitely a worthwhile tangent to talk about John Williams, because I had no idea. When I saw the credits at the beginning, and I was like, John Williams, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then, just realized just now that he won the Oscar for it. That's crazy.
Also, it says the NBC Sunday Night Football theme, written by John Williams.
What? That's insane. That's insane. And then the director of the movie, Norman Jewison, I recognize his name, but I'm going to have to look real quick and see what else he directed. Oh, he's probably more of a Broadway guy, it looks like, huh? Because a lot of his stuff is musicals. Yeah. I mean, he did direct, like, Denzel Washington's The Hurricane and stuff like that, but mostly musical guys. So I'm guessing I know his name from Broadway stuff more than anything else, but I did recognize the name.
So I'm on the Wikipedia page right now for Fiddler on the Roof, and I'm scrolling down, and I clicked on the Best Director link instead of the Norman Jewison link, and it brought up, without even realizing it, brought up the page for Best Director. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at the page for Norman Jewison. I'm like, man, that guy looks a lot like Alfonso Cuarón. It is a picture of Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah, he does have some movie credits here. I guess I should say he was. Well, of course, all these are as producers. Never mind. So no, but he directed Moonstruck. Oh, there you go. He was nominated for In the Heat of the Night, that won Best Picture. And
okay.
So I'm sure he did some theater, but yeah, definitely a name to appreciate for what he's brought to film as well. My one last little random note here. So what I did, because when I was on Topol's page, it did bring up the term that I wasn't actually familiar with here, and I'm trying to think how to pronounce this. Mononymous? Yeah, mononymous.
Mononymous.
Yeah,
yes,
so
like Cher or Adele.
Yes, and I had not heard the word mononymous before today, so I thought that was kind of neat. Okay, yeah, I think we can just kind of sign off. So yeah, thanks for listening to this bonus episode, and we'll get back with our regularly scheduled broadcast next Tuesday.